some myths that have been solved by the internet. Number 10, Slavemaster. If you were on the internet at the turn of the millennium, then you should have heard about the myth about the Slavemaster as a piece of chainmail in people's inbox warning them about an AIM user with that name. Well, it wouldn't be very surprising to find this email in your old mail. But what was so creepy about this Slavemaster guy? Well, as the myth stood at that time, he was a serial killer who lures women to his house through public chat rooms. On paper, this looks like the basic sin of internet spookiness that was rampant during those hellish early days of email spam. But the story here turned out to be more true than you might expect. John Edwards Robinson, a man in Kansas City, Missouri, was a serial killer who first started murdering in the 80s, but he found a new way to hunt in the late 90s, and the internet was a new way. The bodies of 2 of the women Robinson met online would later turn up in a pair of industrial barrels on his property in 2000. He was officially convicted in 2002 and remains on death row to this day. A mysterious way that intruders used to kill a lady, or a myth that was told to scare children, turned out to be true. Want to know about them? Stick to the end of the video. Number 9, Charlie No Face. Imagine you're walking along within the dark in a residential street. It's breezing and you're enjoying your walk, and suddenly you hear footsteps approaching towards you. Well, you become cautious who it can be, but as the person comes forward, you see a man with a misshapen face. You run, terrified beyond words. This 20th century urban legend haunted residents of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Well, many thought it was nothing, just a myth, nothing more, but turns out there is a real man. Well, the true story of this person is more of a tragedy. Charlie No Face, who is called the Green Man, was actually a man named Ray Robinson. Born in 1910, Robinson met an electrical accident at the age of 8 by touching active wires, which effectively disfigured his face. Knowing his appearance could be disconcerting, Robinson took to taking strolls after dark. He often walked a path along Route 351 in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. Though he had no bad intention, encountering Robinson in the dead of the night made many fuel their nightmares. Number 8, Le Lion. For years, there were sightings of a mysterious figure in Switzerland's Mals Forest who wandered around in a heavy-duty camouflage boiler suit and a vintage gas mask. The natives gave him the name Le Lion. Sightings of Le Lion were reported back from 2003, with residents reporting a strange giant wandering the woods. Some theorized that it was a ghost of a soldier or mentally unstable individual. Others theorized that it was some sort of cryptid or alien. The most popular theory stated that the figure was a hermit and that it wore concealing clothes because of insecurity and/or deformities. But all of them were myths, and these myths existed mostly as a tongue-in-cheek ghost story until 2013, when someone snapped a pretty unambiguous photo of the legend in the flesh. This spurred a brief bit of Leon mania in the region. Locals poured over the Mals Forest looking to find the creature in his natural habitat. But this must have rubbed Le Lion the wrong way, as in late 2013, someone found a neatly folded boiler suit with the mask in the forest with a note stating that he can no longer be seen as a monster and that he is harmless. What actually happened to the person behind Le Lion is a mystery. Number 7, the Bunny Man. Anyone who lived in or around Virginia in the 1970s should have heard a rumor or story about something called the Bunny Man. In the tale, an escaped mental patient takes to gutting bunnies and hanging them from a bridge underpass. Later, the maniac is said to have graduated from gutting and hanging teens in a similar manner. What a terrifying breakdown in the mental state of the assailant. So people around the area became cautioned to be never caught near the underpass, which is now known to most people as Bunny Man Bridge. Well, that all could have remained as nothing but an urban legend, but there were 2 sightings of this Bunny Man, and that made this legend into reality. In October 1970, a couple reported seeing a man dressed in a white suit and wearing bunny ears. The person began yelling at them that they were on private property. To punctuate his point, he hurled an axe at their car. In another sighting of Bunny Man 2 weeks later, a security guard spotted an axe-wielding man chopping up the porch of a recently built, unoccupied house. He was gone by the time the police arrived. The real-life Bunny Man was never apprehended, and still now people think twice to visit the Bunny Man Bridge. Number 6, the Catman of Greenock. This one is creepy more than being spooky or scary. The Catman of Greenock is probably the only urban legend to have his very own Facebook fan page. The ones who are relating Catman with having lots of cats, let me stop you right there, because he gets the name for actually acting like a cat. Catman cuts a pretty memorable silhouette, balding, face black with dirt and soot, usually with a rat carcass dangling from his mouth. Well, that's the description according to the myth. See why we said creepy? The first reports of his existence date all the way back to the mid-70s, which means Catman has been subsisting this way for quite some time. Well, he was a part of the quaint mythology of the West Scottish town of Greenock for years. That is until 2007, when someone uploaded a grainy video of the man mid-rat champ confirming the urban legend on the world stage. That being said, the Facebook page hasn't reported any new sightings since the summer of 2017, so that just cranks up the mystery. Number 5. Body under the bed. As a child, the thing most of us faced in our nightmares must be a creepy hand with long fingernails or a lot of blood on it approaching us from under the bed, and without any doubt, those kinds of nightmares made us wake up screaming from our sleep. Many horror movies also use this thing to add a flare of terror into the minds of the audience. But what if I told you that it's not only a piece of our horrific imagination that is based on true occurrences? Yes, these are not myths, and people have faced these kinds of situations. Many have been the subject of this urban legend involving hotel occupants who fall blissfully to sleep, only to wake up to an awful stench coming from either under the bed or inside the mattress. As it got a closer inspection, it was recovered as a dead body, which had been stashed away. And I do have to make it clear that none of them had a natural death. It has been confirmed multiple times over. At least a dozen newspaper stories have detailed hotel rooms that have been used as body disposal sites. Like a couple in Atlantic City in 1999 found a dead body in the mattress. What a scary experience that's gotta be. Ugh. Number 4. The Legend of Polybius. Vintage video gamers have long traded stories about a coin-operated arcade game circa early 1980s Portland that had strange effects on its players. If you haven't heard of Polybius, there's a short version. In the fall of 1981, a mysterious video game suddenly appeared in arcades around Portland. The game, a black box with no name that involved geometric patterns and colorful shapes, was instantly addictive, hypnotic, and in some cases dangerous. We're calling it dangerous because this game, titled Polybius, was alleged to have prompted feelings of disorientation, amnesia, and even suicide. The machine's cabinet was said to be painted completely black, and it was rumored that stern-looking men in black would sometimes visit arcades to collect information from the machine before disappearing. So these suspicions led to questions. Was it a CIA experiment spun off from the MKUltra, the psychoactive drug study conducted on unsuspecting subjects? Well, if that was the case, then it would have been a really scary event, as it tells us that teenagers who played this game were nothing but a sort of project guinea pig. Brian Dunning, the host of the Skeptoid podcast, did some investigative work and found that a 12-year-old named Brian Morrow had become sickened during a 28-hour marathon video game contest in Portland in 1981. Number 3. The Alice Killings. The story of the Alice Killings is one of Japan's most famous urban legends, as well as one of its newest. The legend revolves around a series of killings that supposedly occurred between 1999 and 2005. The victims had no relationship to one another, and the killings seemed unrelated in every way, but they shared a haunting similarity. The murderer often left a playing card, and the name Alice has written in the victim's blood somewhere near the victim. How spooky, right? To add more terror in the mass, the murderer chose the gruesome ways to kill, like impaling body parts to a tree branch, and some horrible other ways too. For an unsubstantiated urban legend, the specifics of these murders are very consistent, right down to the names of the murder victims. There's no evidence, however, that these killings took place at all, but there actually was a serial killer who identified his murders with playing cards, and the most surprising thing is that it happened in Spain, not in Japan. Luckily, this playing card killer named Alfredo Galán Sotelo was caught in 2003 and sentenced to 142 years in prison. But the mystery remains how the murders in Spain became a myth of Japan. Number 2. Candyman. If you're a fan of horror movies, then you've got to be familiar with the movie called Candyman. In 1992, the film Candyman earned its place as one of the scariest movies of all time. One of its most famous scenes involves a murderous spirit with a hook for a hand bursting through the heroine's medicine cabinet. If you ever feared that scene, then let me inform you that this actually horrific and terrifying concept of having a killer burst through a medicine cabinet is actually based on a true fact. In 1987, the story of Ruth McCoy, a woman living in a Chicago housing project, made it into the Chicago Reader. She made a frantic call to 911, insisting she was being attacked in her apartment. Responders eventually found her dead of gunshot wounds. Want to know how the murderer accessed her apartment? Any guess? Yeah, the medicine cabinet. A group of intruders entered her apartment through the gap in the wall made for the medicine cabinet. The complex was built with holes in the walls for medicine cabinets, which provided the only barrier between adjacent apartments. It was intended for the plumbers to investigate leaks by simply removing the cabinet to check the pipes. And the killers used that as a way to get into apartments. How terrifying. Number 1. Corpsey. We all have something that we feared in childhood, and as we grow up, we laugh at those silly, imaginative things. But those from Staten Island area are a bit different. For years, kids living in and around Staten Island raised goosebumps. But why, you ask? Because there was a boogeyman who lived in the woods. Corpsey was rumored to be a homicidal madman, an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who hunted children and dragged them into the tunnel system that lay on the underground ruins of the old Seaview Hospital. Sometimes parents use this name to make their children be good or stay near home. But of course, none of them actually believed that something like this can be real. But it turned out to be very real. In 1987, Andre Rand was put on trial and convicted for child abduction. He worked as a janitor at the Willowbrook State School before it shut down in 1987. After that, he continued living on the grounds of the school and is suspected to be responsible for the disappearance of several children. Rand's activities had a very heavy influence on the word-of-mouth stories that followed. Man, that's terrifying. So that's it, guys. Here ends our list of some myths that were solved by the internet. If you enjoyed the video, then go on and smash that like button. And also subscribe to our channel for more content like this. See you guys in the next video.